I saw Freddie get up and I thought, well, I guess I ain't preaching this morning. You never know with him. I've seen him get up and put his material away and preach 50 minutes. So you just never know. I thought, well, all right, that's fine. Be all right. Turn with me this morning to Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7. We're going to read verses 24 through 27 for our lesson text this morning. Jesus is speaking here. He says, "Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house. And it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it." The text that we just read sums up or brings to an end what we know today as the Sermon on the Mount. Now, this sermon that came from Christ touched on many different subjects, and these verses here at the end are basically the invitation. We see in the first verse Jesus giving a call to action, telling those that are listening not just to hear the things that he has said to them, but to actually do what he has told them to do. And to help the people understand those things, that sermon that he is delivering, he does what many of us preachers do today. He gives them an illustration. Now, illustrations are an amazing thing. This illustration here was about two men, both of which built a house. One man builds his house on the rock and the other on the sand. The text tells us what happens to each of them, but I want us to dive deeper into that meaning of this illustration. Illustrations can be a very powerful tool. They can make us sometimes see things or understand things when nothing else can. And that's exactly what this illustration can do for us here this morning. And as we study what this illustration means for us, my prayer is that we examine ourselves. We compare ourselves to these men, honestly, with an open mind and an open heart. And if we find our house on the sand, we move it. So the wise man built his house on the rock. When I built my house, we built our house about 5 years ago, somewhere around in there. We had to build the pad first. That was the first thing had to be done. You have to do a whole bunch of dirt work to build a pad. Now, this pad that we built our house on, it wasn't made out of topsoil. It wasn't made out of peat. It wasn't made out of silt. It wasn't made out of compost. In fact, when Logan Johns, who did my dirt work, come in with all his equipment, he took his dozer and he pushed every bit of topsoil completely off of it, piled it off in a big pile on the side. He stripped it down to the hard ground. He stripped it down to the foundation that has stood there for thousands of years. He stripped it down to the red clay. He then took more red clay and he built that pad up to the height and the level that it needed to be for our house to sit on. And then the building crew that we hired came in and they did a whole bunch of digging around the outside edge of it and threw out some places in the middle too. And they did they dug what was called footers. Now, these footers are deep trenches around the outside perimeter of the house, and they're on the inside some too. And they get filled up with concrete. And those footers are several feet deep. And it gives our home the strong foundation that it sits on, but the red clay is the beginning. It doesn't work without that hard foundation. It's what makes it work. This man built his house on a strong foundation. Now, I want you to understand something about houses in the first century. They didn't have concrete. Wasn't such a thing. Strong houses were built on this bedrock, this rock that Christ was referring to. And this man built his house on that rock, that bedrock. He used the strongest foundation he could use. He did that because he wanted something that would last. He wanted his house to be there. He didn't want it to go away. He wanted it built right. Why does that matter? What's it matter? Well, it matters because storms come. I don't care where you live. No matter where let's say you today decided you didn't want to live around here and you wanted to move off somewhere. I don't care where you go. Mother Nature is going to test the foundation where you live. Tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, tsunamis, typhoons. They come in and rip apart homes every single year. And the only ones that survive the storms are the ones that are built on solid ground. We see here in this text this very thing. Verse 25 says, the rain descended and the floods came and the winds blew and beat upon that house and it fell not. It stood strong because it was built upon the rock. The storms of life will come, folks. They will come, and when they do, they will beat and they will bang on the very core of your foundation. Trying its very best to just rip it straight up from the ground. But as long as we build on the rock, our house will stand. So the foolish man. You see, the foolish man also built a house. But unlike the wise man, he built his house on the sand. Have you ever been to the beach? We're beach goers. My girls would actually go to the beach 25 times in the summer if they could get away with it. I think the record one year, I think they went 3 times one summer. Was it 3? Yeah, 3 times one summer. They love the beach. I love the beach too, but have you ever walked on the beach, been to the beach, walked on the beach? You'll notice something real quickly about walking on the beach. To get a good sturdy place to stand, you need your feet in about ankle deep of sand, right? You need the sand to completely cover your feet, because if you don't know where you're going. You're slipping and sliding all over the place. And even that's not guaranteed. That's about as best as we're going to get. It's kind of funny when we go to the beach. I don't trust those chairs. Being a guy that's of larger stature, we'll say. I don't trust those chairs you can rent. So I've got to have my own chair when we go to the beach. So when we go to the beach, I've got a chair, Anna's got a chair. Sometimes Kim has a chair, depending on what she's feeling like. We got a cooler full of drinks. We got snacks. We got sunscreen. We got boogie boards. We got umbrellas. We just bought this thing, this big old huge thing that you put up, and it's a sunshade, and you put sand in the corners of it, and it holds it in place. We got to drag that thing up there. We put all this in this cart that we bought from Walmart that supposedly is a sand. It has the bigger tires, right? You ought to see us dragging this thing 400 miles down through there, because of course the beach is 400 miles wide, and we got to get down to the end. And so I'm dragging it along, and I'm about to die. And so then Kim's dragging it a little while. She's about to die. So then we drag it together so we can die. Anna's just easing on through there like it's another Tuesday. Just happy. Just come on, y'all. We're trying to get to the water. It's a sight. It's a sight. Next time you go to the beach, or if you go and you've never been, I want you to try something. I want you to go down to the water, right on the water's edge, and I want you to just stand. Just right, I'm supposed to get out of the camera, it's all right. Right on the edge, right where the water's coming in, the waves are coming in. I want you to see how long you can stand there with the water coming in and taking it out. Because when the water comes in, it pulls the sand out. It's almost impossible to stand there. I like to stand there and just look, but I can't stand there long because the water's going to take the sand out from under my feet. The waves come and the sands shift. And all of a sudden, that sure footing that you had, it's not so sure anymore. The foolish man, this foolish man, built his house on that sand. He built his house on that ground that is not so strong. That ground that is not firm and sure. Those sands that shift and change with every passing of the wind and rain. Those sands that can never really be placed on a map correctly. If you had to draw a map every time the weather come through, you'd have to completely redraw the map because the ground changes so much. Sure is beautiful though. When I see the ocean, I'm just amazed. I've made this point before, but it still stands. I'm amazed at its beauty. I'm amazed at the peace that I feel when I'm there listening to the water. I see the ocean, I stand there and I look at it and I immediately think, how can anybody look at this and not believe in God? And not believe in a higher person that created this? But I still don't want to build my house on it. No matter how pretty it is. Not if I want to keep that house forever. The foolish man built there anyways. The foolish man saw that it was pretty. The foolish man saw how welcoming it was. He saw how peaceful and fun it could be. All the things that he could do and all the things that he could see. And sadly, we do the same thing sometimes. We see the world around us. We see the fun that can be had out in the world. And we build our foundation in the world and not in God. We find ourselves leaning, moving towards those things that are exciting and fun. They seem exciting and they seem fun. We think this spot is so beautiful and perfect. How could it possibly be that bad? And foolishly, like the foolish man, we build our house on the sand. Once again, though, why does it matter? Do you know that every year thousands of homes along the Gulf Coast and along the different coasts all across the world are wiped out by storms? Their foundations can't hold up. Homes completely wiped away, leaving no trace of it ever even being there. Lives lost, possessions gone, because the foundation isn't strong, it isn't solid, it can't sustain, and it cannot weather the storms. Once again, folks, the storms of life are the very same. They come in and they try to rip apart everything that we work for. They try to rip apart everything that we love, everything we hold dear in our hearts. And when they come, if our house is on the sand, it will fall. Each man built a home. I want us to understand something about the home here, the house that they built. The house that they built for us, represents our lives. And the foundations that they built on represent two different things. First, the wise man's foundation. He built his life, his house, on Christ. Christ being that perfect and solid foundation that will hold him up and will carry him through the storms. Jesus was the wise man's foundation, and he's got to be ours as well. It's kind of funny, and we talk about this. He uses this illustration about the foundation. He's actually been called the rock and the foundation a few different places in the Bible. But I'm going to read one to you this morning, 1 Corinthians 3:11. It says, "For other foundation can no man lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ." He also told Peter, "Upon this rock I will build my church." This foundation, I will build my church. You cannot build your life around anyone or anything other than Christ and think that it's going to last, because it won't. Look at the world around us today. Look at the people in the world today. People, do you realize people have absolutely lost their minds? They've gone slap crazy. I mean, it just blows my mind what we see in the world today. Sin is so rampant. It's so in your face. It doesn't even bother people anymore. Things that used to would just bother people to no end. It's just whatever. It doesn't bother them anymore. You can go to any major city in the country. Just walk down the sidewalk and see sin. We went to Memphis because we wanted to see Graceland. The kids wanted to see Graceland. And while we were there, we went to Beale Street, because Beale Street is famous, right? Music, food, and all these different things. And we're walking down Beale Street, and there's crackheads laying in the sidewalk and homeless people begging for money and people doing this and people doing that. And we walk into this record store because Jackson loves records. He wanted to go to a big record store down there. So we walk in this record store and we're walking around, and this woman's here with her little child, and this man says, "Your kid does not need to be here after dark. This is not a place for children after dark." This is the world that we live in. And it's everywhere. Sin is right in your face. No shame, no sense of decency. The world is full of people today whose foundation is not on Christ. Our kids are constantly being exposed to it. Not just us. Our children are constantly being exposed to it. Not just through the TV, not just through the internet on their phones, but in their lives every day. In person. Parents, what do your children see when they look at your life? Where do they see your foundation? Grandparents, what do your grandkids see in your life? Where's your foundation? Aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, cousins, elders, deacons. What do the people in your lives see? Where is your foundation? Is it in Christ? Do they see Christ living through you? Or do they see you living for the world? It matters. For the foolish man, he chose the world. He chose sin. He chose his own desires. He chose not to think about the life after this life. He just chose to think about the here and now. He took the wide road. He took the road that's most traveled. He chose to do it his own way. And he chose not to be grounded. He's like the man that James talked about in James chapter 1 and verse 6. When he said, "For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed." I'm proud of myself because I said wavereth without any problems. When I was practicing, I practiced, by the way. When I was practicing this morning, I couldn't get that out. I thought, I'm going to have to make an excuse for it. I didn't this morning. I got it out. He's tossed to and fro. He's everywhere. He's not grounded. His foundation is all wrong. It's weak. It's easily changed. It's easily influenced. If we build our lives around the Word, our house is going to fall. And like we read in verse 27 where it says, "Great was the fall of it, great will be the fall of ours." Without God, mankind is doomed. We're doomed for failure, and we're destined for a place called hell. The only way to get to God is through Christ. That's it. There is no other foundation that will get you to God. It is through Christ and Christ alone. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me. If you had known me, you should have known my Father also. From henceforth you know him and have seen him." John 14, 6 and 7. Christ, He's the key. He's the key. He is the foundation that we absolutely must build our lives on if we want our house to stand the test of time. So my question for you this morning is, where's your foundation? Where's your house built? Where's your life built? What matters to you? I guess it was more than one question. Who do you place your trust in? Proverbs 3, 5 through 8 says, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding." I could make we could stand up here for 2 hours talking about just that one part, but I'm going to stop before I get off on something crazy and keep going. "In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It shall be health to thy navel, and marrow to thy bones." Trust in God. It's good for you. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. Do you trust the Lord? Do you know He will carry you? Do you realize that not only did God create you, but that Jesus bought and paid for you with His very own blood? And all He asks for is our obedience. Just to obey His word. Obey the doctrine that is given. Do you know the amazing thing about that doctrine, that gospel, that good news? Is that it can change your foundation. You don't have to stay there. You build a house nowadays. If I built my house, I can't move my house. If I wanted something different, I'd have to sell it. The gospel can change your life. It can change where you build your house. It can tear it down from the sand and build it back up onto the rock. The firm foundation. You just got to obey. Paul said, Romans 6, 16 through 18. He said, "Know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are to whom ye obey, whether of sin unto death or of obedience unto righteousness, but God be thanked, that ye were the servants of sin, but ye have obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered you. Being then made free from sin, you became servants of righteousness. Isn't that a beautiful thought? Free from sin, saved from sin, servants of righteousness. Understanding that promise that is given to you. Have you obeyed? Have you obeyed the gospel call? Have you really obeyed it? From the heart, obeyed it? Have you truly placed your faith in Him? Life is so very short. The psalmist said in Psalm 90 and 10, the days of our years are 80 years and 10. And if by reason of strength they be 80 years. Yet is their strength labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away. James said in James chapter 4, verse 14, whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor, that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. You know, we like to think we have plenty of time. We've got all the time in the world, especially when we're younger. I think the older we get, the more we realize we don't have as much time as we think. But when we're younger, we think we've got all the time in the world. And when we think we have all the time in the world, we think we will do things later. I will do better later. I will change later. I will obey later. One day you and I are going to wake up and that later is not going to be available to us anymore. And we don't even know when that day will be. But one day we're going to be all out of laters. Not only for us, not only for just me, but we forget how little time parents, I'm talking to you, I'm talking to me, here forward. We forget how much time we have with our kids. How little a time we have with our kids. The average child stays home until they're about 18 years old. Unless we can rope them into staying longer. Anna can stay till she's 100. I don't care. I'll just die and she can just keep on living there. That'd be fine. We got them until about 18. By the time they turn 18, they're off to college and they're off to making their own choices, doing their own thing, making decisions for themselves. Scary, isn't it, Bridget? Scary thought. They're babies. That's about the average time you have with them before they're making their own choices. Sometimes younger than that. As parents, I want you to understand something. You have 936 Sundays with them. 936 Sundays with them. 468 Wednesday night Bible studies in their life. 1,404 times in the time you have with them to show them the importance of worshiping the Lord. 6,570 days to show them where your foundation is. To show them what your lives are built on. We don't have time. Time is not our friend. We don't have it. Brody's making a point for me. We don't have time. This illustration that Jesus gave in the Sermon on the Mount, it was very short. In fact, it's just 4 verses. Yet those 4 verses, when we study them and we think about them, they have such an impact. They mean so much to us. These two men, the wise and the foolish, they made a choice. Each one made their own choice. And their choices had consequences. Like these two men, you and I have a choice. And like these two men, our choices have consequences. On the one hand, we can choose Jesus as that foundation, and we can build our lives based on His teaching and His example, or we can be like that foolish man and we can choose the world as our foundation. And we can literally just sit back and watch as our house crumbles to the ground. Look at the lives of people who don't build their lives around Jesus. They're miserable. They might think they're happy for a little bit, but it don't last. It's up and down. It's all over the place. There's no lasting power there. So, will you be like King Agrippa in Acts 26 when he said, "Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian"? Will you come this close to allowing Jesus to be your foundation and then make your mind up that you're not going to do it? Or are you going to be like Joshua when he said, "Choose you this day whom you will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord"? Where's your house going to be? How's your foundation? Who do you serve? The choice is yours. And I pray that you make the right one. And we're going to give you this opportunity to choose now, while together we stand and sing for your encouragement.